Реков дека на овој пат владата се консултира со тим експерти од Естонија, од кој еден вечера преку видеоврска од Талин ќе го имаме и во оваа емисија. Станува збор за Раул Каидро, експерт во областа на дигитален идентитет, основач и извршен директор на компанијата Раул Волтер, кој има богато искуство во оваа област за себе. Добро вечер и добре дојде за господинот Каидро, кој што туку се врати од Скопје за Талин. И веднаш првото прашање, истото како и за вице-премиерката, имајќи го предвид искуството од досегашните посети и средби во Северна Македонија, колку граѓаните на оваа земја се блиску или далеку од тоа во рацете да држат електронска лична карта?
Thank you for having me and good evening. Actually, when you think about the rest of the world, you have a rather nice advantage compared to most of the countries. Because from the Yugoslav age, you have the national identity code already in place, the one that is assigned on birth and stays also after death. So therefore, I think the first component, which is most hardest to implement, is already in place. So therefore, I think you are in the best position at the moment. And you have been, of course, for a while. I think it's time now to put that in use and turn that into proper electronic usage for that matter.
Од ваше искуство, колку време ќе биде потребно од оваа фаза во која што е сега Северна Македонија до имање функционално решение во смисла на постојање на електронска лична карта?
Well, technically, as your current EID tender, actually ID card tender is already, or contract is already out, and there has to be a new one. I believe that the tendering process itself can be done within, let's say, something like half a year or so. There comes the contractual kind of negotiations with the potential suppliers. But in the total run, I believe that it's doable within something like 2 years. So by the end of, let's say, 2024, I believe you have a fully functional EID in your hands. I don't think that it will be distributed to the whole nation at once, but by that time, the first cards shall be issued containing the electronic functionality.
Сакам да го прашам господинот Каидро, дали гледа јасна политичка волја кај владата во Скопје за спроведување на оваа, јас слободно ќе кажем, радикална промена?
Yes, I do. And I'm really happy about it. I have been searching for a country that has so much political kind of drive behind the digitalization that actually leads to some practical implementations and not just creating papers, assessments, analysis, etc. But here we can see that there is, on the highest level of up to the Prime Minister, there is a strong political support and strong will to digitalize and to make things better for every resident of North Macedonia. And I'm really happy about it. I'm really anxious to give my best try to see how it actually ends up for the benefit for everyone.
Ќе ве искористиме да ве прашаме и како граѓанин на Естонија, може ли да ни кажете каде се и колку често ја користите вашата електронска лична карта?
Well, that's a little bit complicated question. As a natural person, as a normal civilian for that matter, I don't really talk to the government that much, to be honest. The normal person talks something like 2 times per year. But at the same time, there are a huge number of private services who actually can use the same or start using the same authentication and digital signature methods. So, for instance, I authenticate to the bank every single day, probably more than once a day. As an entrepreneur, I also do my taxes, I also file my reports, I sign pretty much every contract in Estonia has been signed digitally. And there is a funny story actually about it, is that if somebody in Estonia comes to me with a document that has not been signed digitally, and they would like me to sign it on paper, that probably means that there is something wrong with it. Either they would like to change the content or the date or the signatories, whatever. There has to be something wrong with it. So this kind of dependence on the EID and dependence on the quality and the assurance is so high that we have become to trust it and use it more than just once every day, but more like several times per day.
Вие во Естонија и гласате дигитално?
Yes, we do. That was one of the kind of killer apps. We had two very specific operations. The one is tax return that a natural person has to file in each year, and that has to be authenticated and signed digitally using the EID. And the second one, of course, is the elections. Both received a huge number of users, and the numbers have been growing ever since. And it's rather logical, to be honest. In terms of the electronic voting, the fun fact is that the average age in Estonia for the electronic voter is 64, by the way. And that comes from the fact that elderly people actually value their time a little bit more, and they don't waste their time going to the polling stations. But instead, as the youngsters, they haven't ever seen the polling station, so they would like to go and see the actual ballot and post their votes over there. So in these terms, it's very, very normal and common in every age group to use the EIDs for pretty much every use case you can find which requires authentication and digital signing.
И само уште едно прашање. Дали ова е исто така вредна алатка во борбата против корупцијата?
Absolutely. Digitalization as a whole is definitely one of those things that will make corruption a little bit more difficult. Just as an example I described earlier about the digitally signed documents, there is no way to forge them. There is no way to turn back lock on a document that has been signed digitally. So, and on the other hand, when we start this whole digitalization process, there is no need for different kinds of certificates from the government. Let's say a birth certificate, which, as far as I know, is in your case valid only for 6 months, and you probably need it more than once a year. And therefore, these kind of documents cease to exist. These kind of business models, these kind of money machines, they cease to exist. And therefore, I believe that corruption is definitely more difficult. But of course, as life, corruption always will find a way. But on the other hand, I think it's more difficult to achieve because of those security mechanisms that shall be enabled by the digitalization process as such, by the requirements to authenticate, by the digital signing of every transaction there is going to be. And when we talk about different registries, different data sets, different operations and use cases within the, let's say, this kind of e-governance system, in these cases, it's no longer possible to change any values. It's no longer possible to, let's say, create a university diploma out of nothing. So therefore, there has to be a name behind it. There always will be some sort of evidence to check if this record was actually there before and what was actually the basis of that particular operation. So therefore, I believe it's pretty darn difficult to run the corruptive operations after the full digitalization has happened in a country. So yes, it will be a very, very good and very effective tool to fight corruption.
Господине Каидро, ви благодарам за учеството во 360 степени.
Thank you for having me.